Hey guys, and welcome to another Diablo 4 video. Today we're going to take a look at a very fast build and leveling guide for Season 1 Rogues. This is pretty much going to guarantee you the perfect start with this class, access to the minimum number of things to get the strongest build going, and a few more tips for easier chapter completion when playing as a rogue. Now, as soon as you jump into the seasonal content, and assuming that you skip the main campaign, then you can jump straight into the new main story. And I heavily encourage you to constantly follow this whenever it becomes available, because this introduces you to a whole bunch of new mechanics, including the Malignant Hearts, the Malignant Tunnels, and a few more on top. And this also brings us to one of the first and best new XP farming methods in Season 1, which are the Malignant Tunnels. So you can see these on the map by their distinctive colors and icons, but essentially they all provide anywhere between 45 to 65,000 XP, so you can't go wrong picking either of these. However, each turn to complete these only takes anywhere between 3 to 4 minutes tops. This makes them some of the best early on options to level up really quickly. On top of that, they are also abundant with all of these Malignant Elites and even the Invokers at the end, plus a boss eventually, so you're getting at least a handful of Malignant Hearts every time you complete one of these. Now, there are some of them that are slightly better than others, and the one that I found to be the best, like really close to the max cap, is this one right here called Dindai Hollow, somewhere around the Dry Steppes region. But essentially this provided me the maximum of 65,000 XP per each run, so it was also quite easy to complete. Plus, it's important to complete these as you go into the chapters, because there's objectives in there, including one in chapter 5 that requires you to complete 15 of these in total. And yes, they apply retroactively, so even if you start them at level 1, you're going to see them counting for that objective, even if you didn't reach that chapter just yet. Plus, you also get all of these cool and interesting new Malignant Heart mechanics, including some that can help a ton in combat. Like, for example, I have this Shadow Clone on my Rogue, which actually distracts enemies, takes the heat off me, and also explodes at the end of it, which I found to be extremely good early on. From here on, there's a couple more things that I suggest doing. One of them is to complete only one stronghold per region, or 2 at max, depending on how you stand with the renown. The only one that you should not complete and avoid, at least until level 50, is the Temple of Rot, because that can be used as a means to level up a bit quicker. But everything else, in terms of the ones, for example, in Fractured Peaks, in Skull's Glen, and so on, they are fair game and you can go ahead and complete them. Because if you do so, and assuming that you already started with almost close to complete renown in the Eternal Realm, you only need 1 or 2 more strongholds to gain the 3rd renown unlock right there, which also gives you the final skill points that you need. So if you do this with every region, you're going to get that extra 8 skill points on top, because these did not transfer from the Eternal Realm. Now, the reason I said to avoid completing the Temple of Rot, which you find right here on the side of the map in Dry Steppes, is because this is probably the best XP farming method up until about level 50, 45, 50, give or take. This essentially gives you about 50,000 XP every 2.5 minutes, which is the amount of time needed to do a full run of pretty much all of the mobs that spawn inside of it. So in this case, as it is suggested, go ahead and only complete this up until the final boss encounter spawns, but then log out and log back in to reset it. You don't want to finish the boss or interact with the main plaque. You just want to defeat the enemies inside of it, because these are constantly going to be at least 3 levels over your own character level. So you're constantly getting that XP benefit on top. But outside of this, a few other suggestions I have is to obviously complete dungeons that are also part of the Tree of Whispers, and if they happen to be those that also provide you the aspects that you need for your build, it's even better. Tree of Whispers is actually a great source of additional items and even more XP early on, especially since you might already complete quite a number of these anyway. But I also suggest paying attention to the sellers that are part of the Whispers, because there's a achievement, or well, an objective over there that requires you to complete about 10 of these in total, I believe, in chapter 2 or 3. So basically you can just complete the Whispers as well as that objective at the same time. But let's move over, because we talked about dungeons, to the items that you should get as a rogue ASAP. And the first thing you're going to want to do with this is to focus on the Twisting Blades build. This is the one that we're going to run with because this is the fastest, focuses on very high speed and mobility, and you're going to breeze through content in no time. So the first thing you're going to want with this build right away is the Blade Dancer aspect. So go ahead, make your way to Jalal Village in Skull's Glen. You can pretty much start this at any point after level 10, I believe, even 15. Grab it because this makes/breaks this build. Once you get it, you're going to be able to spam your attacks, make them spin around you, and this is what enables this build to the next level. As I've said, we're going to only focus on the bare minimum as we level up since we constantly switch items anyway. So the only other couple of aspects I recommend are as follows. One of them is the Ravenous aspect. You get this from the Shifting City in Dry Steppes. However, you have to complete the stronghold in that area before this becomes accessible. But this will give you that massive energy regen boost that you need, especially since you constantly defeat vulnerable enemies anyway. And finally, the Edgemaster aspect from Old Stones, also in Skull's Glen, and you will want to place this on the necklace to gain some additional advantage from it and have your skills deal more damage. Now from this point on, and if you leveled a little bit and maybe got some level 15 in there, you're going to want to immediately jump into completing your class specialization quest line, which is going to start right here at this NPC for the rogue. But if you complete this, this is going to be important for the next step so that you can unlock the combo points and then the preparation once you hit level 20 and truly make this build really awesome as it is. There's a few more on top in there, but as I've said, we only focus on the bare minimum, and if you get just these, you're going to breeze through the content with this all the way until level 50, when you can then start creating the full build. But until then, I recommend just placing them on your offhand, or well, the weapon that you don't use, which in this case is the crossbow, as well as the amulets and the 2 rings. Don't switch it on any other gear piece because you're going to swap them in and out very often as you get better and better loot. But if you put it on something like a crossbow, these are going to be exactly the same or almost the same up until level 50. You're not going to see much of an increase in the vulnerable damage that you get, maybe just like 5% tops, so not really worth switching. Also, if you put it on something like an amulet, you can continue with that all the way until level 50 or when you get something truly better. In my case, I put the Edgemaster on the amulet and the Blade Dancer on the bow. But otherwise, you can also use those 2 rings, as I've said, and apply something on them as well. But in terms of how our build looks, let's go over it because this is essentially going to be focusing on, as I've said, a lot of movement speed. So otherwise, Puncture with the Fundamental Puncture is still going to be our staple. It applies vulnerability early on because we don't have many sources. It also slows enemies. It's really great and we want that for the energy regen too. From here on, we're going to focus on our damage ability, so Twisting Blades and just enough upgrades to reach the advanced version so that we can also reduce some of our cooldowns. Yes, it's low level, but even in this case, it does help a bit. Once we do reach the agility skills, we're going to jump straight into getting the dash, an amazing low cooldown ability that just lets us traverse much faster. Plus, we can also take a couple of points in Shadow Step, including the methodical upgrade so that we can also stun enemies, and this should be enough to also reach the Subterfuge category. Here, I'm going to go with Dark Shroud, and specifically, we're going to go with the Subverting Dark upgrade, which is going to increase our movement speed by up to about 20% when we have full number of shrouds. Once we do that, we can go back into just implementing a few more points into the Twisting Blades up until we can unlock our imbuement skills. Now, since I'm playing Twisting Rogues and since I like Shadow Imbuement for early stage, this is a great source of AoE and damage, so you can totally go ahead and even pick up to the Blended Imbuement upgrade so that you can also spread more vulnerability. From this point on, since we might struggle a bit with energy regen, consuming shadows, a couple of points in it can help quite a bit with that. From this point on, I'm just going to go ahead and invest whatever points I have until I can reach the ultimate into Weapon Mastery. Once we reach the ultimate ability, here we're not going to take anything active, but mostly just passives. So from this point on, we're just going to focus on the passives. So we're gonna take that sturdy with the siphoning strikes. This is going to help us to survive for a bit longer, even though it has been nerfed quite a lot. Weapon mastery going full 3 out of 3, as well as in this case exploit 3 out of 3, as well as malice going full on over there. Also, in terms of precision imbuement, we do want that, so we can go with a few more points here to help us with critical strikes. And finally, we're going to focus on more energy regen, so this is why we're going to take innervation, a couple of points, or well, 1 point in adrenaline, and then 3 into haste. And finally, with the key passive, we're going to go with momentum, which is going to further help us with our damage reduction, movement speed, and energy regen problems. If you have any points left from this point on, you can just invest them more into the twisting blades and max it out. As a matter of fact, you should probably max it out before maxing out the passives that I just told you. It's something that I skipped, but you get the idea. And that pretty much concludes the build guide. You're going to breeze through the content that I've said with no problem. This is going to deal enough damage on its own without having to constantly rely on any outside sources. Plus, you're going to want to constantly alternate between doing those malignant tunnels, doing that Temple of Rot, alternate that until you reach level 50, or if you can jump straight into World Tier 3 before hitting level 50, then you can totally do so, switch to Tier 3, and maybe even start doing a few Nightmare dungeons to get the true max XP possible that you can at that stage. And that is pretty much it with the rogue class. Let me know down below how far you are right now in Season 1 and if you are enjoying it. I'm kind of in between, but at least we get the chance to just create new characters and level up a bit faster. This is it. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.